Morning, everyone. My name is Philip Zacchio, and this is my video recording for CYB512 Assignment 7.1. This presentation is essentially going over some differences while comparing and contrasting a handful of security aspects between your cloud options and your on-prem options. So let's just jump right into that. Before we start, just wanted to kind of give a brief definition on cloud and on-prem. Starting with cloud, think of it as your data and resources are going to be stored on servers outside of your environment. With these servers, because they are outside of your environment, you'll need some kind of internet connection, whether that's a hotspot or Wi-Fi connection or even a wired connection, to be able to access the data and information on these servers. I always think of it kind of as data on demand. And then you have on-prem, which is essentially very simple. Your data and resources are stored in-house. So they're stored on servers within your environment or within your organization. Should be always accessible to you, other than if any downtime occurs on the servers. And then the next point I want to go over before we get started is the three different cloud platform options that a lot of vendors will offer to you as an organization. Starting with software as a service, or SaaS, the initial software is going to be what's offered to your organization or customer. And then yourself as the customer are going to be responsible for the data and access controls, where the CSP or cloud service provider is going to be managing everything else, like the security, the uptime, the server maintenance, all that good stuff. A good example of this would be Microsoft OneDrive for all of you Windows users. OneDrive, you have your cloud storage software offered by Microsoft that they're maintaining, but you are maintaining and manipulating the data within that software. The next platform is platform as a service. As you can see on the slide, the operating system is provided to the customer. However, the customer is responsible for the data, again, as well as any software configurations on the platform. Kind of a hybrid between SaaS and then IaaS, which is infrastructure as a service. With infrastructure as a service, the physical infrastructure is provided to you. So your server, they give you a server, and then you as the customer will get to choose, the different specs of your virtual machines, what kind of RAM, memory you want those virtual machines to have. You're also responsible for, again, installing the operating system on the machine, whether you want it to be Mac OS, Linux, Windows. And again, the end user or customer will be responsible for the data that is hosted on the IaaS option. So the first aspect of security to go into and look over is the security foundations. And what this meant to me were your, all your tools within your environment, your firewalls, AV, your antivirus, EDR, which is endpoint detection and response, IDS/IPS, and UAC, or user access control. With on-prem, you've essentially got full control of your environment. You can set it up to however your organization or your team wants it. Have the ability to make any changes that you want within your environment because you're hosting it. With your cloud option, you may have a little bit more limited control of the environment. That all depends on what the cloud vendor is offering your organization. Could be heavily relying on SLAs or service level agreements, which are essentially documented documents that you sign before going into partnership or agreement with the CSP. So depending on how much freedom of customization they want to give you in their environment, that could be somewhat limited. But again, that is also based on what type of cloud offering you want to go for. Whether you want to go for a SaaS, which is heavily managed by the CSP, or the IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service option, which you're basically responsible for most, if not all, of the options within your environment. On-prem is said to be more cost-effective in the long run. Again, you're hosting everything, whereas the cloud option could be a little bit more pricey, just because it's being hosted by somebody else. It could be maintained by somebody else, all that good stuff. Detection times when talking about EDR and your firewalls could potentially be longer with an on-prem option. And we'll get into this a little more with the EDR discussion later on in the slides, but if you're on-prem, you're most likely managing that stuff on your own, whereas with a cloud option, depending on a vendor package that you're working with, it could be managed by the vendor. So, for example, your CrowdStrikes, your SentinelOnes, all the big-time players will offer you a managed solution, which they will manage for you, or the on-prem solution. With the managed solution, could be quicker detection rate, as you constantly have one of those partners in your environment looking for those threats. On-prem has the risk of longer downtime of appliances, such as servers or other applications running on those servers. Maintenance could be a factor of downtime, unexpected downtime. Takes time for your team to then have to shift what they're doing to work on getting that back online. Whereas with the cloud, you're seeing minimal downtime. Again, this is heavily based on the service level agreement that's signed, with how much downtime or how little downtime the CSP is guaranteeing from their product or solution. With on-prem, you're going to also see a larger emphasis on patching the systems. That's going to be all on you to make sure you're constantly patching and making sure all of your systems and servers are up to date. Whereas with the cloud option, your CSP will probably more than likely roll out their own patches on a regular basis. I know Microsoft is like the first Tuesday in every month or something like that. But with the CSP, they will be primarily responsible for rolling out those security patches for you. With on-prem, again, finally, the customer kind of been saying this throughout this slide, but they're responsible for everything. Upkeep of your servers, downtime, threat detection, all that. With the CSP, they will potentially take more of the brunt of the work off of your hands. Again, and this is all dependent on which cloud platform you choose, whether it's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, or software as a service. Next, getting into identity and access management. And when I think of this, I think of you've got one main. I'm a heavily Windows user, so I'm thinking of the one main on-prem option and one main cloud option. But also through a second cloud option in there based on the labs that we had completed in this course. Starting with your on-prem option, you have the classic domain controller. For anyone that does not know, the domain controller is the server that is responsible for user access as well as authentication and the different authentication processes within your environment. Usually used alongside AD or Active Directory, again, Windows environment. What Active Directory will do is it will store different computers or devices that you want to store in there. You can create user accounts and in there assign different security groups to those users, controlling their access right on-prem. It's extremely important to protect and secure the domain controller within your environment. That's what the bad guys are always trying to compromise. If they do get into your DC, then you're in serious trouble. And so yeah, the domain controller is definitely the main. Kind of think of it as almost the heart of your environment. You really want us to make sure it's secure and protected. Moving on to the cloud version of identity and access management, I was thinking of Azure AD. Azure AD is hosted by Microsoft, and essentially it is Active Directory in the cloud. You can set up your user accounts, and you can join your Office 365 accounts to your organization's Azure AD simply by I know you can do this directly from your device. So it's a setting under your Windows settings where you can sign in with your created Office 365 email address and password, and it's just as simple as that. Your account will be assigned to Azure AD. Your device that you're working off of will also be assigned to Azure AD. The platform is also really good for managing user access to cloud applications, very similar to different groups within the normal Active Directory. And then I just threw the GCP platform in at the end here, specifically the identity and access management roles. I know we had a few assignments pertaining to creating and assigning the IAM roles, and also having the ability in the environment to create custom roles where you can assign custom access to your user accounts. The next thing to go into is detection. Two main points of detection are going to be your firewalls and your EDR software. With your firewalls, you can have them set up again on-prem or in the cloud. On-prem, you can have a physical device set up and managed by your security team on site within your organization. You can also have a cloud-based firewall where you set up the hardware and it's then managed through a web console, whether that might be by your team or the vendor. As you can see in the photo here, the Cisco Meraki MX64 firewall comes to mind to me. You also have a potential hybrid option here where you can set up the device in your environment and manage it in the cloud console. Next, the EDR, endpoint detection and response. This solution, as briefly mentioned before, the big players, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Microsoft even, can be on-prem hosted or cloud hosted. Again, if it's on-prem, it's going to be managed by your IT and security team. So if you don't want to spend as much, but you have the resources in your team to manage this, may be the path for you. If not, you can go with the cloud option, which is it can be managed by your on-site team. You get a portal, you can log into the web portal. Your team can manage the different stuff in there, or depending on the vendor that you choose to go with, they may offer what is called an MDR solution, which is managed detection and response. So they'll be managing your EDR solution in the cloud through them. Now, a lot of them will offer an option to access the SOC. So you can manage this, you can manage the solution. However, if you see something in your environment that you're not quite sure, you have the ability to send that over to the SOC or the Security Operations Center. The guys there will analyze it and they will get back to you, letting you know exactly what it is and how to remediate. Next, moving on to your infrastructure protection. When I thought of the infrastructure protection, I was mainly thinking of the different aspects within your IT environment at your organization. And when thinking of your organizational infrastructure, three things come to mind for me: your hardware, your software, and your network. Starting with your hardware, that's going to be your servers, your endpoints or PCs, any other devices, any data centers that you have on-prem. All of these are going to need to be protected, and the first thing that jumps out to me is going to be your physical access controls. Your doors, if you have fence around your facility, magnetic locks, the RFID readers that you scan your badge into every morning. All that stuff is going to be managed by you and your organization. In terms of hardware and the cloud, all of the servers that you're going to be connecting to, those data centers are going to be protected by the CSP, and obviously because these servers aren't hosted on site at your organization, they're going to be hosted at wherever your CSP is located. They're going to be responsible for those access controls and those physical access controls. Moving on to software. Regarding software applications hosted on-prem, I know we have a few applications hosted on servers on-prem. It's going to be your IT team's responsibility for those maintenance of the applications. So these are going to be, your applications, operating systems, any virtual machines that are being hosted. If it's on-prem, it's going to be your responsibility to maintain the upkeep of those. Again, patching anything there is going to fall on you. Whereas if it's cloud hosted, depending on, again, the platform that you choose for your cloud option, as well as service level agreements, the CSP will be responsible for a lot of the software. Quickly to recap, software as a service, they're offering you their tool. They're maintaining everything with the tool. You're responsible only for the data. Whereas an infrastructure as a service, you're going to be primarily responsible for more and more of the maintenance on that. The CSP will still be responsible for the hardware, but they're going to be relying on you to maintain that environment. And the final infrastructure protection option that I see here is the network. And your network is very important to secure. Again, this is going to be internet connectivity, any VPNs that you have, firewalls, and routers. Your on-prem option, again, mainly going to be maintained by you and your security team or your IT team. If it's cloud hosted, the maintenance will be done by the CSP. On-prem has the ability to outsource to other third-party vendors for help, but primarily you're going to be responsible for making those calls, getting those service requests started, and troubleshooting on site with the third-party vendor. Data protection is next. Very important, without a doubt. One of the most important pieces of an organization is going to be the data within it. The first thing that comes to mind when you're discussing data protection is encryption. You should always have encryption on your data. Any emails that you send out, whether that's DES, triple DES, AES, SHA-256. I know there's a bunch of them out there. But you want to have some kind of encryption algorithm on your data, and you want it to be secure. Next, looking at data storage. On-prem, you can store this data on physical hard drives or external backups or any servers on site that you want to store this data at. However, you are at the risk of your hard drive failing. If you lose those external hard drives, if it gets stolen somehow, it gets misplaced, you're going to be real in trouble without the proper backup solution, which will be talked about on the next slide. When looking at data storage with a cloud option, again, kind of talked about at the beginning of the presentation, it's going to be stored on a cloud server offsite managed by the CSP. So you're going to be manipulating the data, but they're responsible for securing the data. Next, looking at access to the data. With on-prem, you have those UACs, or user access controls, in your Active Directory environment. A good practice would be to go off of least privilege access to this data. And again, you've got those physical access controls that you can implement. Again, your locks and your doors, your magnetic locks, your fences, all that good stuff. When you're looking at access to data hosted in a cloud environment, kind of going back to what I had said before, the servers where the data is hosted is off-site. The CSP will be managing the physical access controls. I know in one of the GCP lab videos, they were talking about extremely strict procedures and processes just to even get into one of Google's data centers. So kind of think of it like that, where that will be how your access to the data is managed if you were to outsource it to a cloud provider. And then once you're done with the data, you're going to have to destroy it. If you're on-prem, you can hire some third-party vendor that specializes in hardware destruction to shred them or smash them. However, this could potentially still be recoverable no matter how many pieces the hard drive is broken into. Excuse me. When looking at this through the cloud, the best way to do this to destroy your data will be crypto shredding, which comprises of you're encrypting your data with your key A. Then you're taking that encrypted key A data and you're going to encrypt it again with key B. After that, you're going to delete the data. And then once the data is deleted, you're going to delete both key A and key B. And then the final thing just to speak on is incident response. With on-prem incident response, you can hire a security team. God forbid something happens in your environment. You can hire a team of professionals to come in to perform your incident response procedures and practices. This can, if you have the resources and the skills within your internal IT team, this can be done by them. They can, run your FTK, all the good forensic stuff. With the cloud option, again, depending on a vendor that you go with, I know in EDR specifically, they have what is called auto remediation. I know SentinelOne has their rollback solution where you can essentially roll back the environment before, for example, a ransomware attack was to occur. But some vendors will offer auto remediation for you. They will do everything. Because they're monitoring your environment, they will take care of all of the incidents for you. Data recovery is another important part of incident response. You want to make sure that your data is able to be recovered. Data stored and recovered from your external devices. Again, you mentioned the external devices on your the data on your external devices, whether they're your external hard drives or USBs, and then your cloud option, your data recovery. You can outsource something like Veeam where your data is backed up on. So that's pretty much it. Just a few more brief mentionings here. With on-prem and cloud, these are some pros. With on-prem, you can require more effort to manage. It can be more cost-effective over a longer period of time, and you're able to keep all that sensitive data in-house. With the cloud, you can provide more flexibility in the organizational environment. It's easily scalable, so you only pay for what you need. The data can be backed up in set time increments. If you want to back it up every 15 minutes, every 30 minutes, this can really minimize your data loss. And no on-site hardware or maintenance is required, as that is all done by the CSP. So thank you for listening in, and that is the end.